Welcome to SoundBreaker. On today's episode, we're talking to Andrew Batey, who is a groundbreaker in the music industry. Thanks for joining us. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do before we dive into it?
Yeah, my name's Andrew. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of BeatDapp. We're basically the fraud detection service for the music industry. So we sit on top of a lot of the streaming services data and help them understand who is manipulating stream counts. I think a lot of people have the misconception that it's artists, that artists are sort of like juicing their streams to game the charts or whatever. That inevitably does happen, but 80% of the fraud we catch is financial scammers. Think like credit card scammers that are using the music industry to exploit money out of it, and it's coming at the cost of artists and labels. And so around 2 billion a year is stolen from artists and labels, and we exist to try and stop that.
Wow. You know, a lot of artists get kicked out of streaming platforms and distribution company because the fault falls on them.
For sure.
I seen it. Yeah. Unfortunately. I mean, this hopefully will prevent that and stop that from happening.
Yeah, a lot of times the artist doesn't know, right? Like they're just
not aware of it.
they're buying a marketing service, and we're told this is guaranteed real organic streams, and then they find out it was like a bunch of computers and it's a bot and it's not real, and it comes at the cost of their career sometimes. So I think that it's important for them to know, but again, it's not artists themselves. Even that specific use case is only 20% of the issue. 80% is industrialized crime, who are generating trillions of streams to try and steal money from artists.
Wow. And it's happening from places in the world that you probably never heard of.
Yeah, all over, everywhere.
Unbelievable. Andrew, if you don't mind, take us a bit back, if we're going to go back to your early days of being a teenager, let's say, or younger than that. How did your passion or love started with the music industry, or music with your parents, musicians, or in the music industry, or you? What inspired you?
I actually was more into film and TV. So my aunt worked for distribution for Sony. I had another aunt that on the film side that worked for Disney. I sort of grew up around the film and entertainment space, like tangentially. I got to experience going to red carpet premieres and stuff when I was a kid, and I don't know, I was always in love with movies and film, and so I actually started as a film and TV agent. I worked on a lot of really cool properties, and I got really lucky with that, and worked on some big hits. And I took that money and started investing into things that I really liked, which was like Facebook games and some bars and restaurants. And so I was like, super young, just kind of exploring the world, starting with it like as an investor, and sort of learning more as I went. And being in film and entertainment in Los Angeles, you're just inevitably around a lot of artists. So you end up in a lot of studios, you end up hanging out with a bunch of young up and coming artists. You meet a lot of cool existing artists, and you sort of fall in love with that whole world. And somewhere around the late 2000s, I started helping artists launch using this idea of social media, which at the time was very novel. I know it seems normal now, like everyone has an Instagram account and their Facebook, but that was not the case back then. Like you had email lists, you did radio, you did promos. You didn't really run a social campaign as your core foundational piece of a marketing mix. And so I believe that was backwards. I thought that you could take an owned audience on social and launch an artist. And no one believed me. I remember pitching it to everyone, and they were like, this is for kids. Facebook's for kids. We don't do this. And so we took an artist at the time from Nantucket that we'd kind of discovered from a beach bonfire. We made him a rapper, and we helped build an entire brand around him and launch him. And he went number 7. I think it was number 1 iTunes, number 7 Billboard.
Wow!
All albums, all from a social sort of component. And so after that, like a lot of artists wanted to work with us because you look like what we did was magic, and it was just sort of like interesting. And now it's every day. Like now everyone has a focus on socials, but back then that was completely novel.
I mean, social is everything right now. It's everything.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of labels before they sign you, they look at your socials. Like, what's the eyeballs? What do you got? How many followers, fans, likes, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't care about that back then. They didn't view it as
No.
relevant back then. So, they didn't even call it social. They called it like I would hear anything from new media to digital to online. Like no one really had even a name for it. And it was interesting. I really believe that if you could consolidate the 18 to 24 demo, that you could, because
Hmm.
they're naturally viral given the college and university market, that you could probably have a huge hit. And I believe there was this underground of unappreciated support there. And if you could tap
Hmm.
into that market, you could launch an artist the same way that you could with radio or with ads or anything else. And so I felt like it was a novel way to try and launch an artist. It worked. It proved that we knew what we were talking about, and then we did
Hmm.
it over and over again with a bunch of other artists after.
Is the term social media, it's becoming old already? The term is
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's sort of like just like the internet, like no one says the internet,
no.
but it's like exists, that's kind of how I
Yes.
feel about socials. I think social changes a lot too. Think of things like Be Real or Gas or any of these weird things. They're just like social can be different or in a lot of different ways. I think it's just an online shared experience amongst people is kind of the way I would define
Yes, yes.
it.
You pretty much kind of answered my next question. What I was going to ask you about sharing your journey as an entertainment and technology entrepreneur from early ventures to founding BeatDapp, which you
Yeah,
probably kind of, you
there's
didn't
some
answer the whole
inner.
thing. Yes, yes. But maybe you can give us more of a in-depth on it and how your experience have shaped your approach to to innovation in the business development and business
I
development. I'm sorry.
I think if there's one thing that's been I've been fortunate with is sort of timing and being ahead of things. So with socials, with social stuff, I was way ahead building Facebook games when it was largely still EDU based,
Yeah.
and sort of moving past that. I was one of the first on, I think one of the first 50 on Twitter advertising, as an example, when it was still
So
in
wait a
beta.
second. So is it fair to say you're one of the few or Facebook billionaires, millionaires, maybe? Should I?
I don't know if I'd go that far. I probably made more money after that in the next phase, which was you know I I was always a bit early on stuff, and one of those things was crypto. So I started mining Bitcoin at the end of 2011, beginning of
You're kidding
2012.
me. So you own
Uh,
a lot of bitcoins?
I own a significant portion of Bitcoin.
Knock on wood. I
Um,
like that. So we are talking to a secret billionaire here.
so
The
so
first on
I was
SoundBreaker.
I was everyone's weird crypto friend for a long time, and it was weird because I worked in tech. I built a marketplace up where we had users from 100 countries. I
Yes.
built a healthcare company doing sort of. We scaled a healthcare company where we were doing communicate basically when you confirm your appointments for your
Yeah.
dentist or your doctors.
Uh-huh.
So we did a ton of those and sort of scaled that quickly. I did like a heavyweight logistics company. So there was always this tech lean for me. I moved on from entertainment into tech, found I was really good at it, and kept
Yeah.
building tech companies. Separately, I sort of thought to myself, this crypto thing seems interesting. I'd met this kid that lived above me. I say kid because we were both kids at the time, but we're still friends actually. We went to dinner not recently, long ago, but he introduced me to Bitcoin. He was writing his thesis on Anonymous, the hacker group. And he was like, "Have you heard about this Bitcoin thing?" And he
And that
showed
was
me what it was.
2011,
Yeah,
2010.
exactly. To
Wow.
11, 12. Yeah. And so he like helped me set up my first like little mining rig on my computer and told me, how it worked. And all I knew is this kid was putting every dollar he made at the lab into Bitcoin. And I thought, if there's something going on here, like just the belief this kid had and the passion he had for it. I don't know. I just felt like there's something here, and I wasn't sure what that would be, but I just felt like we should investigate it. So I started really mining, and then eventually miners got so expensive back in 2013. It was kind of the first big like
Hmm.
public hype cycle, and so then it crashed in 2014. I thought, well, this was up, this was it, like it went from 1200 to 200. I'm like, game over. Like, this was a fun run while it lasted,
Yeah.
and
From 1200 to 400, you said?
yeah, when I remember it got to like 12 or 1300 and everyone was fever pitch. It was like in the news constantly, everyone was talking about Bitcoin, but then it dropped to like 200 or 300, it crashed kind of around, I think the
Yes.
Mount Gox was probably the kickoff for that when Mount Gox got hacked and
Yeah.
So it's pretty cyclical. Like Bitcoin and crypto grows, and then someone gets hacked, and then and then everyone bails, and then 2 years later it grows again, and then somebody gets hacked and it bails. This time, it's fraud, but whatever. Like the story is kind of the same. And so anyway, it's kind of
Well,
everyone's weird crypto friend, and everyone would come to me with like blockchain questions. And so how I ended
yes.
up in BeatDapp was the industry was talking a lot about Bitcoin in one of these hype cycles, 2017, sorry. And
Yeah.
everyone was talking about how Bitcoin or blockchain could be applied. And I was kind of everyone's crypto friend, but had known a lot of them in the music industry from before. And so I was sort of the guy that everyone came to and said, like, is this possible? And truthfully, I was viewed as an expert, but I would say that I had people I viewed as experts. And one of those guys was our CTO now. Somebody we had a crypto trading club at my last company, and he was building like crypto trading bots and all kinds of stuff with me. And so I went to him and said, do you think we could build this and help solve the problem for the music industry where we talk about how many times was a song actually played? Because the labels that came to us said, we have no idea. Like if an artist gets played 100 million times or not, we get a CSV. How do we know that that was real? Like we don't actually know what the number is. Could you build a real-time tracking tool so that when we get the CSV, we have your receipts next to it, and we can say, actually, you said 100 million, but we have receipts for 140. So could you build a blockchain tool that tracks in real time? That was what we tried to set out to do back in 2017, 18. And we built that. We actually had the world's fastest blockchain. We did 10
Hmm.
million transactions per second per region.
Wow.
But the problem came that you can't detect fraud in real time because fraud is based on a sequence of events. So it's very difficult to say this one right away is fraud. You need to see how they're engaging with the platform over time. And so real time sort of audit doesn't work unless you can solve fraud. And once we
Got it.
realized there was a ton of fraud, because in real time audit, you have this thing live and you're seeing all the data, and you're saying in real time, I recognize Andrew. He's played the song at least 30 seconds. He's in the right revenue generating tier, whatever. That makes sense. But then all of a sudden you look at me for a week and you're like, how did Andrew play a song 33,000 times? That's impossible. So you start being able to see the discrepancies over time, which you can't see in real time. And that's when we realized audit doesn't work without solving fraud. We have to solve fraud. And our entire company focused on fraud detection. And we
Yeah.
became sort of the leader in that space because we had no other choice.
Wow. So basically, pretty much you solved one problem, but then another one arose. It's like, okay, how do we know some of these streams are real or not real?
Exactly. And
Hmm.
because it wasn't like 1%, like we were seeing massive amounts of these discrepancies. So it's not like a rounding error. It materially changed the numbers.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting. Bitcoin to all of that. Really interesting. I want
Yeah.
to ask you something before I jump into the next question. How do you, I mean, I have another question later, but not as in depth in this one. How do you get ahead? Like you're always ahead of the curve. Is there a formula you use? There a secret, or you just so in tune and knowledge, like you're always reading, you're always searching, and you kind of put it all together and say, the industry I think would need this, or what's gonna happen next. What's your
Yeah.
formula?
I wouldn't say I'm
If you don't mind
always.
sharing.
Yeah. So the two things I know to be true about myself is
Yeah.
I'm constantly learning and not just
Yeah.
about things that are useful. Like I talked
Yes.
for like 6 hours once with someone who owns olive ranches, basically olive farms, to figure out like how olive oil is made and how it's best used and where it imports from and what ships it goes on and how it's containerized and packaged. And like I have a constant curiosity that I think
Yeah.
leads me into areas that are maybe obscure and weird. And sometimes those areas are in tech and sometimes they're not in tech. But the consistency is I'm always just curious to learn or know things. So when I meet another founder, often ask a lot of questions because I'm just curious how their business works. I'm curious how how they mechanize it, what the product looks like, what their channels look like, what their
Hmm.
business models. Like I just have lots of questions about that stuff. So it tends to just be one. I think that because I've built a lot of companies and I've mentored thousands of companies at this point, like tech companies in different sectors, I have a good pattern matching ability to see a lot of things. So I see something in one industry and I go, oh, that reminds me of these four companies that did it this way. I bet if they
Hmm.
shifted this one mechanism a little bit, they'd get a better result. And my
Hmm.
background is in growth. So I used to build quant models and run fast iterative tests. So my entire nature of my career has been how do we test that and like turn it into science. I write a hypothesis, I write what the supports are. I write what the expected outcome is. I have a control group and a bunch of tests underneath that. And then I have a learning outcome sheet that comes after. So I'm just like constantly running tests. And I think after you've done thousands of these, your brain just starts making connections in different ways. And so one is preparation meets the opportunity. And so when the opportunity comes up, I think the preparation puts me in a position to exercise that opportunity or to actually do something with it. And that comes a lot of different ways. So it came in blockchain. I was the first person to build a Bluetooth self-locking bike, get rid of the hub and do a hubless bike share system. That was back in like 2013, 14. We were on Engadget and Wired Magazine and all these things. Like we built like a crazy bike share back then. So it's interesting, but I would say that how I'm ahead of it is because I'm constantly curious. And then the second thing is I'm unwilling, I'm willing to fail. I'm sort of willing to put myself out there and look entirely stupid in the quest of just sort of figuring this thing out. It's because it's interesting to me. So I definitely had my fair share of failures. I tried to be the first artist on the moon. That didn't work out well. I've done a couple crazy things where I was like, this would be really fun if we could do it. And it didn't work. And that's okay. That's how it works sometimes.
I like that. Sky's the limit with you. You don't care. You'll dream as far as your brain could take you.
Yeah. I think some people like tell themselves why they can't do something. And my first instinct is to think about working backwards and asking why not. Like I wanted to be the first artist on the moon. So if you go from that route, someone I worked with that I knew really well programmed the arm. He was an engineer, and I was like, oh, let's work backwards. Like, can you reprogram the arm? Where does the arm go? What's the next mission going up? Who would we need to get sign off for? Like, and you get pretty far down the path. And next thing you know, like you're negotiating deals with big organizations, to be the first artist on the moon. And in our case, the reason it failed wasn't our fault. The reason it failed was because the project management company in between went out of business. And it killed our window for launch. But I mean that's something we couldn't control for. So I feel fine with the reason it didn't work. But it's just like, again, everyone would think you're crazy if you start telling them stuff like that. You're like, why would I do this? And it's like, why not? Like that sounds super fun. That sounds like a really cool thing to do and try. And why not mine Bitcoin? Who cares if it doesn't work out?
Yes.
Why not try to build a blockchain for music industry? That sounds kind of interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Why not? Absolutely. I mean, is it fair to say that you had more than multiple, I would say, a bunch of exits or no?
Yeah. I've exited 4 times. And then, I have a pretty large trading desk for crypto. I was an investor, in a lot of the top, blockchain and sort of crypto protocols that are out there. So I would say, I've been a quiet ghost for a long time. I don't normally like to be in the forefront. I like to sort of help founders from the back and sort of just be a soundboard. At the base of it, my expertise are in growth, fast iterative testing, growing your company as fast as possible. Like I really excel in that seed through Series C, like sort of scaling format. So I think where I've been beneficial in blockchain is helping blockchain companies understand how to build a real business as opposed to just build cool technology.
Interesting.
And I think that's where I've been largely helpful and also maybe picked a lot of winners because I thought they were solving a real problem as opposed to just being cool technology. So kind of being able to blend that gap of tech, meets emerging opportunity.
Do you get involved with young entrepreneurial startups? Like, let's say they have a good idea or already they build it, but they don't know how to market it or get it up and running. Because some people, they have the idea and the power to build it, the resources to build it, but they don't know how to they don't have the infrastructure to make it work. Like, we're not in that business, but we came up with this idea.
Yeah.
Just, or this product or this AI tool or,
The short answer is yes, but I would say that the amount of which largely depends on how much time I have in my life or what's going on at the time. So like, for example, because BeatDapp is all consuming,
yes,
I really haven't done much of that. Like lately, I would say mostly what I'll do is say, hey, let me give you some quick advice. These problems are solvable. I'll meet with you as a founder and say your org chart should look like this if you're trying to move this direction. I'm more of a soundboard for like affirmation or giving you maybe a quick look around the corner to say, this is going to be a red flag. This is going to be a red flag. Like, you should look out for that. In the hands-on building, I don't normally do that lately because I'm just so busy with BeatDapp. If I wasn't as busy with BeatDapp, I would be more excited. When we
Hmm.
started BeatDapp, after it became clear BeatDapp was going to be a real business,
Hmm.
more than just an idea, I actually just resigned from all my board positions and advisor
Hmm.
positions. And I still help a
Hmm.
lot of those companies. I help them staff. Like if they're hiring a head of growth, I'll say, here's who you should hire and here's who's best in this area. I might interview a candidate or two to kind of help make sure they get the right fit. But generally speaking, my focus is pretty intense. And so, I don't want to be distracted from sort of the core mission here of
On
delivering
BeatDapp.
value and yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
BeatDapp, you still, are you guys involved with any other major partners, or you pretty much still the head control and the whole brain and owner of the company, BeatDapp?
Well, myself, I have a co-CEO named Morgan, so we
Yeah.
share almost everything, like in terms of contracts and negotiation. Like we
Yes.
basically just split the work down the middle and say, you get this one,
Cool.
I get this one, and we sort of
Good.
help. When he was having kids, at first he was a bit MIA, and while he was dealing with that, and that was fine. It was like kind of we've known each other for over a decade, so we have a pretty strong working cadence. And then when I started having kids, started, needing support, and he would carry the water basically. So,
Great. That's what
like,
partnership is about.
yeah, like,
Absolutely.
and then obviously we
Yes.
have a strong CTO who everyone reveres at our tech team loves him. He's not just our CTO, but co-founder. I mean, he was on the pitch, he was on the circuit pitching for funding with me our very first round. And, we did all the hard stuff in the trenches together. And yeah, so it's very much a team effort, I would say. But in terms of where we're positioned as BeatDapp, we're definitely the leader. I think most of the incumbents in the industry, a lot of the large players, distros,
Yeah.
DSPs, labels, all view us as the solution. And
You
largely
guys
that's
work
because
with DSPs, excuse me, with DSPs and distributors and labels with everybody. You
exactly.
have a group.
Yeah.
So pretty much B2B, or artists could come into you, individual
No,
artists.
B2B. We
B2B
work
only.
directly, yeah, B2B only. And the reason is because the data we're given is very, very protected, and
Yes.
and 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 honestly it helps individual artists anyway. So because of the platforms we were on in
Hmm.
2022 as an example, we shifted market share back 21% gross points to all artists. That includes majors and indies. So if you were an independent artist, you made more money because BeatDapp was implemented. You just probably
Amazing.
didn't know we existed. So we sit in
Hmm.
the background and we help the streaming services identify what's fraud and what's real. And then we help them sort of reconcile those payments to the correct artist. Because I think what artists don't realize is these aren't other artists stealing from you. This is like credit card scammers who generally run like the Prince scams or calling to try and get you to wire them money for something. These are just regular old scammers who have gone, oh, we can load music onto platforms like we're an artist, then run a bunch
Yeah.
of streams against our own music and steal money that would have otherwise gone to real artists. And so
Got it.
that's what they're doing. And so we help independent artists even if they don't know that we're helping them. Like that's what we're doing. We're here to help the artists. And I think that
Hmm.
because of that, it's been good and bad. We aren't owned by a major. We aren't owned by a streaming service. We have no strategic investment in the company because we need to be neutral. Like, I don't care what the number is as long as the number is truth. So we are trying to find fraud and make sure it's real. The numbers that we project out and say, this is what these artists should be paid. And we've never compromised on our ownership structure, so that we aren't ever perceived to have a thumb on the scale. We want to be the trusted source of truth in this case.
I'm sure one of the big DSPs, they'll come and probably acquire such a service because it's needed, like, Spotify or somebody else. They use your
Yeah.
service. Am I right? Spotify,
Yeah,
Apple, and all of them.
the streaming services use us, but the buyer won't be a streaming service because if you think about it, we have so much data from all these partners, we would never
Yes.
sell the company to somebody that's competitive. Who likely buys a BeatDapp or a company like us is a security company or somebody who wants to focus on, like, who already sells edge defense and SOC 2 compliance and penetration testing, and like can offer those things also to every one of these customers in the music segment, or an accounting firm who wants to be able to offer this as a package deal to customers in general. So I do not see a major or a Spotify, anyone like that in the industry ever owning us. We will always
Oh, a
be in a
publisher,
neutral
maybe? What
position.
about a publishing company? A big
Again, we
publishing.
wouldn't want anybody that own us that is that has a incentive for the numbers to be different. we would
Hmm.
only really sell this company
To
to
security
somebody
as
that is going to be completely neutral,
got it.
who has no incentive to lean one way or the other.
Hmm. I like that. You have, yeah, I like the integrity of the whole setup,
It's
and the
hard. I
focus.
mean, when we
Yes,
first started,
it is.
everyone in music was willing to give us money, and that was the easiest money to get, but the money we couldn't take. It was sort of like the forbidden fruit
Really?
a little bit.
Wait
Yeah,
a second. Are
because
you telling me, are you the only startup who were offered money by major record labels
probably turned it down.
and yes, and streaming and DSPs, and you turned it down?
Correct. Yeah, we don't take
Wow.
any strategic money at all, and that was the hard part, especially because there's a lot of dead companies out there in the music space. So a lot of investors are a bit hesitant when it comes to music tech, and they really
Yes.
relied on the fact that they could trust myself, Morgan, and Poria to steward this company correctly, and we were taking a big shot. It was something that no one had ever done before. It was really hard to it's hard to validate this. Like, you tell investors, hey, there's a big problem here, and then they go look for research to show that, and there's no research
Yeah.
because you're so far ahead of everybody. uh, it's hard to prove. So there's a lot of trust there where investors just have to trust you and say,
Yes.
okay, like I think these guys know what they're talking about, and I'm gonna bet on them. And one of those guys there's an example, for example, Andre Charu, who he's the GP at Maple VC. I mean,
Uh-huh.
his LPs or his investors were like, probably, what are you doing? This company is never going to make it. Music tech, are you crazy? And he was one of our early checks and just strong believers. And I definitely know he got pushback from his investors who really didn't believe that he knew that we would make it. But he stuck with us, the whole way through. And um, I think he probably, I hopefully will make him look like a genius now. But it's hard. You need those true believers to back you,
Yes.
and it's difficult.
I like it a lot. I actually do. That's why I wanted to do the interview. You know, myself and my business partner, and we were talking about it. I'm like, yes, this is very interesting. We definitely need to do an interview with them.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's cool.
Yes. Even with your answers, man, you're ahead of me, always ahead of me. Before I ask the question, so,
Sorry.
no, I like that. I like that. You pretty much cover a lot of the stuff. Beat BeatDapp has been recognized as a top company globally. Music company globally, and has garnered numerous awards and accolades. And what do you attribute the success and recognition of BeatDapp, and what sets it apart from other solutions in the market?
Yeah, I would say um hmm, the the reason I think that we're recognized as this leader is because we were largely ahead of the whole problem. So what sets us apart is, if you think about it, we spent millions and millions of dollars developing a solution that
Hmm.
hadn't really been publicly acknowledged yet, because we'd seen this data insight and we knew it existed. But a lot of that was educating our partners, because a lot of our partners didn't know it existed. We could see the data, but they maybe didn't have the same, machine learning models or things that could highlight it in a way that was easy to consume. And
Yeah.
so I think the reason that we're viewed as the leader is largely because we've had years head start where we built all this technology. We were teaching our partners along the way what that meant and what the business implications were. And so I think that that's really truly how we've sort of won, is that because by the time everyone was publicly talking about this, we had already locked up a lot of the major, customers in the market, and they had trusted us to deliver these results. And we'd been quietly sort of working through what this means for them and how they can implement change. And,
Mm.
um, I think we were good partners. I think also we understand the music industry really well because we were both from the music industry, all of us. So, I built, launched a bunch of artists on the promo side. Morgan, before, actually was actually a copyright lobbyist. He helped extend copyright protection on behalf of the artists from 50 to 70 years in Canada. He
Hmm.
worked on behalf of a lot of the majors and rights owners. So I'd say because we were from the industry but had the technical chops, we also
Yes.
understood that this was an adoption issue, not necessarily a tech issue. Like, we knew we had to build the tech, but it was really about, can we get people to drink the water? Like, that's the phrase, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. Like, can we
Correct.
provide them the opportunity, and will they accept it. And I think that was really something we had to figure out and sort of prove on our way. And it took us a number of years to get there. But I think those years is what the moat is. Like the reason we're so far ahead of everybody is we've spent years refining our technology and our models. And, anyone that comes in now is effectively 4 years behind.
Mm,
And I think that's a really tough position to win from in our space.
I see. As an early adopter of major industry transformation, you've filed numerous patents across various emerging technologies. How do you see the intersection of artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, blockchain, and data infrastructure shaping the future of the music industry? And what role does BeatDapp play in this transformation?
Yeah, so all of these technologies you just mentioned, I think
Correct.
have the potential to make a fraudster's job easier. They'll
Uh-huh.
use AI, they'll use machine learning. They're honestly, if you're a fraudster, probably ahead of most industry people in terms of their knowledge and exploitation of how to use these things. Um, our role is to detect those instances, to use technology to sort of advance our own detection systems and make sure that we're um, as far ahead of it as possible, and make sure that artists get paid correctly. I think again, the thing that's interesting in this use case is that we're all on the same side of the table. Artists,
Yes.
all the supply chain, labels, DSPs, we're all being stolen from. And it's not from the industry. These are outside the industry people who are using technologies to do so. So from my perspective, I think our role is to always stay ahead of this stuff and constantly push to have the best tech, even if it seems like we're doing a great job. We should always be searching to do better. And like one of those things that we do is we have a full-time dedicated now R&D team. You would look at our tech and say, you guys are world class at solving fraud. Why would you have an R&D team? Well, the reason is like fraudsters move. It's like whack-a-mole. They're always changing their approach. They're always trying to stay under the radar. We are looking for always these new novel ways of like implementing machine learning models or graph IDs, or we built like a DNA sequence. Basically, imagine if you could look at the way someone listens to music and create a DNA for that specific person. So if their DNA chain breaks, their account's been stolen. So like there's all this novel tech that we've built to identify when fraud is occurring. And I think that is how we stay ahead of it, is by embracing that fraud, being the tip of the spear, and being unafraid to say, why not? Like let's build tech for that and see if it's happening.
I was going to call you the police of the music industry, but not. You are the SEC of the music industry. Am I
Hopefully
right
a
or
bit
not?
more nimble.
Yes. Absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
well, I love that the crypto guy is being called the SEC. Like it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But, the way you're monitoring everything, any transactions, that's how they do it. And
for sure.
yes, absolutely. Beyond your entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial pursuits that you have, you also involve in mentoring and teaching next generations of business leaders, which
Yeah.
is I wasn't aware of until the other day. I was like very impressed by it. How do you balance your role as a founder and CEO of BeatDapp with your passion for education and mentorship?
Yeah. So I think the thing that I haven't talked about too much is I think ADHD is my superpower. So the reality is that if I didn't have things that I was going to do outside of just BeatDapp, be it like a quick stint mentoring a kid or whatever,
Mhm.
I probably would be researching, how to become a lord in England or something. Like I just don't. I go down these rabbit holes, and my sort of like attention diverts, and so I actually think these mentorship or advising helps me do something positive because the context switches are directed. So they're like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm directing into this, and like my brain will make the switch, but at least it's making a switch into something that's positive as opposed to
Yes.
something that is not impactful at all. So I would say that it's really helpful for me because it actually, I think all of the things I do succeed because I don't limit myself, not because I'm distracted. And so I actually think one feeds the other. And it reminds me of like, I remember watching that, not that I'm going to call myself the greatest ever, but watching the sort of Michael Jordan documentary. And who I related to wasn't actually Jordan. It was Dennis Rodman, because he just disappeared to go like gamble and party in Vegas and then come back for the championship. Like
Yes.
my sort of jumping over to help founders sometimes, or like advising them on a thing here or there, is like me going to Vegas. My brain just needs to jump over, and at least that's positive. Like I'd rather
Yes.
be helping a founder than doing something else. And then when I jump back, I'm sort of like ready to keep pushing the ball forward. And I think that I've just learned over time to sort of direct that mentorship as those context switches. And
Hmm.
and I might not be right all the time, but I think the reason I'm pretty helpful with these founders is, at this point, I've probably helped at least over 1,000 companies over the years. Figure 20 years, batches of
Wow.
accelerator companies.
Yeah.
I've invested personally in over 150. So you kind of get to a specific point, and I think you've just seen a lot and you failed a lot, and you can pattern match, and you go, oh, that's a cool fintech thing. I've seen 20 others that are better because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that you can just be a very real sounding board for a founder that way. And I think that's probably valuable. And I think that's also, it's like a mental gym. Like every time you step into someone else's business, you're just learning something new. And I think that's just as valuable for that curiosity quest that I told you about
Hmm.
earlier. Like I just love it. I love learning about your business, and, you know, tell me about mental health and fitness. Tell me about,
That's it. Yes.
like, your weird liquid staking for crypto. Like, tell me about, your next liquor company with Pitbull. Like, just, I'm here for it all. I think it's just so cool. And I love
And
meeting
from there,
founders.
you get new ideas. That's right. Once you get into,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
And you're
Very
helpful.
interesting.
And it's sort of just like, it's an amplification. And I think you help, it's a cheat code for founders, because you can say, I'm not going to be 100% right, but I'll probably be directionally correct most of the time. And I would say I'm 85, 90%. This is the broad strokes blueprint for you. Now you need to contextualize that to your own business, and you're going to know your business better than I do. But here's the direction, and here's the main pillars of what you need to watch out for. And if you take this sort of and morph it to what works for you, I think you'll be in a good position. So I think I have that ability. I'm not in the weeds, making this change to that change, but I can put them directionally in the right path, or tell them, more importantly, if they're heading the wrong way, and tell them like, hey, your business model doesn't make sense because of this, or you'll never be able to sell at scale because of the way that your marketing mix looks, or whatever.
Hmm. That's an incredible journey you had so far, Andrew. The
Thank you.
music
Appreciate that.
industry is, yes, the music industry is known for its challenges and setbacks. Can you share a difficult moment you faced in your career, and how did you overcome it?
So myself, uh, everyone know, I not everyone, but I've been sober now for 13 years. It'll be 14 years later this year. And I
Knock on
think,
wood. Knock on wood.
yeah, thank you. In like early 2010, I pretty much lost everything. It was really weird. I went from
Oh.
being a millionaire and sort of having all of the like superficial fame, I would say, like being in LA and owning bars and restaurants, and sort of like being in the in crowd, like all the things that you sort of, that are like the wrong types of validation. Anyway, I
Hmm.
made a lot of poor decisions and lost almost everything. And so I think my journey was really hard, because I had to question deeply when I was younger, who I was 25 at the time. So who I was and what I wanted out of life, and how I was going to be impactful, and like what type of person I wanted to be. And I think really tough questions for myself. And I remember my wife, my now wife at the time, I just met her. We were probably dating 3 or 4 months. I met her 3 or 4 months after I got sober, which they say you shouldn't do, but whatever, we're here now.
Yeah.
And I remember she took the bus for a year. I didn't have a car. I literally lost everything. I didn't have a car. She gave me her car to go to meetings and try to rebuild myself. She took a bus to a retail job every single day for a year. Um,
Hmm.
I think the thing that helped me sort of get there was truthfully my wife. Like if I didn't have an
Oh.
empathetic foundation at home, I think I would have not been prepared for the chaos that is startups. And I tell founders all the time, like you can have chaos at home or you can have chaos in work. It's very difficult to have chaos at both. And so
Yes.
you can be single and do startups really well because you don't really have chaos, or you can be married and have chaos at home, but you probably won't do your startup very well. And I think where I've largely succeeded is that I have an amazing wife who's been super supportive of me from all of this chaos and sort of is even keeled, lets me know when I'm stepping out of line. Believe me, it happens. And she'll be like, "You're being a giant dick. You need to come back this direction."
Well, we definitely need to give a shout out to Mrs. Beatty for sure. And
And the
SoundBreaker,
same
she's
is
a
with
contributor. Yes.
Morgan too,
Go ahead.
like his wife supports him on this journey, and Poria, his wife, has been
Yes.
there, not for the whole time, because
Yes.
I think they've been together 4 or 5 years, but
Yes.
ever since. She's just so supportive. And I think that's the consistent thing here is we all have really stable home lives, which allow us to handle the chaos in sort of a
That you
better
face
format.
out, and yes, in the work. Yes.
And so, yeah, I think the most important thing for my journey is it's okay to fail. And I also think knowing that you can fail and come back, there's a power in that makes you less afraid to fail when you move forward. Like I know what it looks like to fail. I know I'll be okay. I've obviously put guardrails in place this time so I don't lose everything. But I think
Yes.
that there's a power in accepting failure as an option and being unafraid of it. And I think that there's a power in having a home stable life that with a lot of supportive people around you, because it's a team effort outside of work too.
Correct. Very inspiring, my friend. Really is. I mean, for all the young people out there and everybody, you've been in both sides of the coin. So I would say you're definitely a SoundBreaker for sure. Creating your own
Thank you.
path. Yes. And very inspiring to others and to yourself, like, to do such a comeback.
I appreciate that.
That's a big, yes, absolutely. In your opinion, what is the most or some of the common misconceptions in the music industry that people have?
I think the biggest common misconception is they believe that the industry is dumb or not technologically advanced because they choose not to use tech. I think that what people don't understand is that we've all seen AI, we've all seen machine learning. We all know that blockchain can be used for rights management. Like these concepts aren't novel because we're not using them. I think the thing that people don't understand is that adoption in the music industry is the hardest thing. And it's because there's been this patchwork of misaligned incentives from all the different supply chain vendors that to get something ubiquitous across the industry requires so much buy-in and coordination of different parties that finding alignment's the hardest part. It's not tech. Like most parties involved would agree that tech would be cool. Getting them to use the tech where it might not impact them or affect them or could negatively impact them, that's the hardest thing. So I think what people misunderstand about the music industry is that it's not that we're tech averse. It's that incentives don't often align to allow technology to help everybody. And I think that if you could think about how tech can be a win-win for every person in the industry or everyone in the stakeholder supply chain, I think that's the starting point. The next thing I think people don't understand is that this isn't like normal tech where it takes 18 to 24 months to get adoption. You're going to need 3 or 4 years. And that's really important because how you fundraise, how you build your teams, what type of expenses you decide to take on, that's all impacted if you think about how much runway you need. And so if you go into this thinking, the key to adoption is by having everybody have a win. The key to winning is by having 3 to 4 years worth of time. Like you need to build around that. And I think that's the misconception. Like tech guys come into music and go, they're doing it wrong. They don't know. Like this is how it should be done. And the music industry is pretty quick to get rid of that stuff. Or they come in and they have a great idea, but it doesn't reach that maturation point because they just didn't raise enough money to get there and it dies on the vine. And so I think knowing that from the beginning are like the two most critical components to winning.
That's why you think there's always a big pushback in the music industry when it comes to technology. And I feel the music industry is always behind. They're always late, like other businesses and other sectors or other fields or industries, I should say. They advanced and the music industry is still kind of behind.
It's not to say every industry is like this, but like the music industry is interdependent in a way that is unlike most others, like because they all share in some components. So it's like some percentage of royalties go to your distro, some go to your manager, some you have publishing that's in different countries, you have admin for different deals, you have CROs and PROs, and they're all interconnected to the core atomic unit, let's call the artist or the song. But they all have different values or incentives. And so trying to build a tech to span all of them is different. If you're in fintech, you might just care about a bank and that bank's customers, and you don't care necessarily what the other banks are doing. I think that
Yes.
makes that added complex is what people don't understand in the music industry, because everyone's interconnected or has 20-year relationships with someone who might be they may have worked together for 10 years and now they're on the opposite sides of the table. And even if the deal works for them, they might not want to screw their friend over. And so like it's an interesting dynamic where I think you need to have a win-win for everyone involved. You need to learn how to be competitive but cooperative. And I think that you need the runway to figure out how to get there. And that's not likely going to happen in 18 months, which is the typical cycles that you see from most tech companies.
Yes. Um, as you know, collaboration is often a key element in the music world. Could you share a memorable collaboration story of someone you've worked with who left an impact on you?
I would honestly say it's Universal Music Group. We have
Oh,
a
okay.
partnership with Universal, and I think often, and that partnership looks like this. They ask everyone to take a look at us, like they're just a friend. And I think that they don't own part of us. They don't pay us. They're not our customer. We don't pay them. I think what's interesting here is that, like I said earlier, we shifted market share 21%, not just because of majors, but for independents, like across the board. And I think if you
21%.
look,
That's a big size, my friend.
huge. So imagine you're
Yes.
a large label. Doesn't matter if you're Universal or not. The dollars add up. Like the absolute value of that shift is massive for you. If you're an
Yes.
independent artist, maybe you went from 20 to 24 grand.
Hmm.
So it might not seem as relevant, but you still benefited because we existed, because we were there helping fight this fraud. And so what I think is interesting, and keep in mind, you're not the problem. Even if you're an artist who's juiced some streams, like you're the small minority of the problem. The problem of these financial scammers. So like let's focus on that, because that is what's stealing most of the money here. And
Hmm.
so from my perspective, what's great about what UMG has done is they said, we don't care if we benefit or we don't benefit. This is what's right for artists. This is what's right for labels. And we know that we have a platform to push positive change. And obviously, there will stand to benefit, just like everybody else, but they're benefiting equally. It wasn't like their job to push it. It was, it equally benefited everybody. But I think by them helping BeatDapp gain adoption and presenting us as a solution, and publicly telling people that we're great and that they've looked at our tech and we're awesome, I think that just goes a long way to helping the entire industry. So for me, that collaboration is a key element and like left a memorable impact, because every for years, even when I was younger, the majors were bad, the indies were good. Like
Hmm.
majors control, majors do. They were like, the sort of dark forces.
Yes.
Is like how it's always been positioned if you're not part of the system. Like being in a neutral territory, I can say that less than 1% of all fraud, like points of a percent of fraud, come from major labels combined. So if you put
Really?
all of them together and you put the fraud in, they're not causing the fraud. You might
Hmm.
see an artist here or there juice some streams get caught, but they aren't. The majority of this problem lives outside of the music industry with these financial scammers, and we are
I
actually
see.
all on the same side of the table. So people don't realize that Universal is going to bat here for all artists, and I think I find that pretty admirable to see a big organization put their neck out for all artists, even if they don't directly benefit from those artists they're helping. And I
Hmm.
don't know, I personally find that to be memorable because I just didn't expect it.
Interesting. Listen, I'm not into gossip and repeating the news, but just curious, your opinion on the latest move between them and TikTok.
um,
And I know they're your partner. I'm not saying,
yeah,
just
I mean, they're not, yeah. So my opinion is that artists do need to get paid fairly, and I'm guessing,
yes,
like, I'm not read in on it, so I should start off by saying, like, I don't have any more information than people do, like
yes.
reading it online. Like I
Hmm. Hmm.
received my news the same way everyone else did. I would say that
Correct.
my view on it is that there will be some sort of settlement that occurs, and that I think that this is just another example of Universal saying, like, we fight for artists and their rights. And I think that um, whether or not people join them on that journey is up to them. But I think because they're so strong in their market position, they have the ability to affect positive change for all artists, not just UMG artists. So I'm curious to see how it plays out, but I think what I know now is it stems from a place of good, I guess is my
Yeah.
point. I think where intention matters, and I think their intention is to put artists first. That's for
Yeah.
fraud. That's for like TikTok. That's for everything. And I think the intentionality is what matters here. And I would say, having gotten to know them over the last few years, I think their intentions are positive, and I think that it will impact everyone in a positive way, however it works out. And I'm sure that it will work out, at some point. But again, I don't have any extra information. I'm just adding color from what I know them to be as people and operators, and I think that they're truly trying to put artists first. So whatever
Hey,
you take from that, that's what it is.
I mean, Universal is pro artist and they fighting for artists. That's
I
what
agree.
matters.
Yeah.
Yes. Kudos to Universal. For our viewers and listeners, two things they want from you. And first of all, they're going to be inspired by your story and this great, informal and interview, I would say, and motivating. Let's not forget that.
Thanks.
Yes, two things. First, they're going to be curious, how does Andrew stays updated on the latest trends and innovation or changes in the industry, and how important it is to continue to learn, and what advice you have out there, combining two questions into one,
Yeah.
for the other young entrepreneurs who would, after hearing your story and watching this interview on SoundBreaker, they're gonna walk the path that you walked and say, you know what, we love this. Yes, there is hope. We could do it. And what advice you have for them? Because as you know, this business industry that we're in, the music industry, has a lot of gatekeeping in it. So please.
So I would say, so the first question, part of your question is about how do you stay relevant, or how
Yes.
do you
Yes.
how do you stay up to date?
Absolutely. Yes.
Um,
All of that.
I think it's about staying curious. Like, do you have a
Yeah.
quest to learn? Do you have like a thirst to learn something? I guess not just being okay with status quo, and that might be an intrinsic thing that you just have to decide what kind of person you are for that. Um, so for me, I just love learning. I love learning about everyone's businesses, even if I can't be helpful, even if it doesn't impact me financially. I love just learning about what people are doing and seeing, what, like, cheering for them, I guess, as a founder to founder, sort of like being their cheerleader when they do something successful. So I would say there's that. I have the added benefit of having invested in a lot of companies and mentored a lot of companies. So I probably get thousands of companies sent to me per year of different types of tech in different sectors. And I think
Hmm.
that amplifies my ability to connect dots. So I'll see tech that's brand new. It could be nuclear fusion. It could be hydrogen fuel cell units, wind powered turbines. Um, a new karate league called Karate Combat. Out of Miami. Like, there's all kinds of cool stuff you see, and you kind of take tidbits and stuff, and I think you just learn along the way. And so when things present themselves, you're like, oh, I've seen, like, what if we did this, and it's sort of just like having a toolbox of a bunch of tools that you can use in
Yeah.
any situation. So I would say how you stay relevant, I believe, or staying ahead, is just by constantly being curious and being unafraid to fail. Like, if you're like, oh, that's a cool LinkedIn thing, what would happen? Well, nothing's stopping you from trying it. Like, what, like, might as well try it. Or I want to learn to
Yes.
build a website. Go build a website for your dog or something. Like, like, go learn to do these
Yes.
things, because I think it's valuable. And then um, the other thing, advice I have for the gatekeeper side of things, is I think often everyone's trying to break into um, potentially break into a portion of the industry. This isn't always the case, but often, where they will displace somebody else. If you think about it, like, you're an artist trying to get broke, or you're a songwriter and you want to get in the next rights. And so you go meet with like songwriters and say, hey, if you have a right coming up, can you put me in? And that's at the cost of who they would have probably called, who they've worked with. And so I
Mhm.
think what's interesting is this concept of creating your own lane. So if you think, at least the way I've been successful is, like, I was the first person really to break somebody on social, and everyone thought I was crazy. And then now everyone wanted to talk to me. At that time, no one talks to me about social now, but at the time, everyone wanted to talk to me about how to leverage new media strategies for breaking artists. By becoming an expert in a specific lane, you become the
Yes.
go-to person that all of these gatekeepers call to ask for help on, and you just increase the size of the pie. So instead of trying to go take someone's slice, you should try to figure out how you can be additive and grow the pie for everybody, and then own your lane in it. And I think that that's how I think about things. That's, when I think about fraud, like, no one was really fighting fraud. We help solve this fraud problem for a lot of vendors. We didn't take from anyone. We've been additive to every single person in the supply chain, but we also have our lane. And I think that that's like, you won't see us going and making payouts and deciding to be a distributor or deciding to morph into something else. Like, this is our lane. It's financial audit and fraud tools. And like, we are additive to everybody. So when I think about that, I think of how do you become the expert in something that people need? And how do you become the relied on go-to source for that expertise? And then I think the gatekeepers, they don't care if you're 30, 50, 12. I actually, funny enough, I knew a startup that their number one programmer was a 15-year-old, and they had to hire a special tutor to conform to all the local laws because this kid was like a complete savant. And they completely restructured their engineering team to accommodate this 15-year-old kid. And the thing is, you can break in if you're the expert in something because people need it. If you're trying to take food from somebody, I think it's a lot harder to win.
Absolutely. Good advice. Definitely good advice for our listeners. Any upcoming projects that you want to advertise or mention for our viewers and listeners once they watch this wonderful, informative podcast interview on SoundBreaker?
We have a huge, obviously we work with a lot of DSPs, the streaming services themselves, but we actually help a lot of distributors. Like, the thing people don't realize is a lot of distributors have 40 to 50% of all of their streams are fraudulent. It's because the distributors are being used as a pipeline for all this fraud. Wait a second,
40 to 50%?
Yeah, if I read you the last month's report, there's probably like 12 that are over 80% on one of our platforms and like another 15 that are 20% plus. Like, it's large numbers of fraud. And the reason is these DIY distros, there's less emphasis on maybe artist support or helping with the artist services side, and they become sort of a pipeline for people just to tap into and do releases. And the problem with that is you don't always know who those people are that are releasing, and it's hard to catch them on the front end because they don't look like fraud. They look like you or me. They get onto the platform and then they start running the fraud. So the hard thing that's crazy is that if you're a distro right now, you're looking at massive clawbacks from streaming platforms. You're looking at fines that are going to be coming for pushing fraud on.
Yes.
And we offer a fraud tool, a suite of tools for distros. So if a distro comes to BeatDapp today, we can basically help them by saying, hey, look, we're going to give you an API of all the confirmed fraud we have so you don't upload an artist that's already been caught as fraud in the past. We're going to analyze all your streams and tell you who's fraudulent before you pay out and before any stores tell you, so that you're way ahead of it. And then we're going to give you the clawback reports so you can go to the labels that are causing the fraud on your platform and say, you owe us money back. You're causing us a lot of problems. So
unbelievable.
I think we're a huge lifeline for distributors right now. And so if any distributors are listening, I would say they should.
Does it tell you what region, what part of the world all these streams coming from or being pushed?
We know, but we can't tell the distributor until they give us their data, because it's not our data to give. It's the DSP's data. We give it back. The DSPs can see this. Like, they're not blind. They can see the fraud we're showing them. But we can see where it's coming from, who their worst labels are, who their worst songs are, who their worst albums are.
Amazing.
What percentage of all of their streams are fraudulent. Yes. Like, we know that at 99.999% confidence.
Well, I tell you, I mean, I want to make this even interview longer. Probably is the longest. My producer probably tell me, what are you doing? But I tell you, I truly enjoyed it, and I've been extending it because there's so much information you have. Definitely. Well, first of all, thank you for joining us today.
No worries, Bob.
My pleasure. And this concludes today's episode of SoundBreaker. Please make sure to follow us on socials to stay tuned for new episodes, and see you. And thanks again.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Yes, sir. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the SoundBreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.